Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by Ian Conroy from New Zealand, Liam Carrigan all the way from Japan, and our very own Quinny also joins the Tuesday Club. Delighted to be in your presence, gentlemen, and we're going to be talking all things Celtic. Get the comments in thick and fast. We're on the verge of signing a couple of players. Now, by the way, settle your emotions at the moment. It's Ross Doohan and Callum Osmond. Okay, I'm being a wee bit harsh. That's your transfer business just round the corner, Quinny. You can understand the Doohan business being out, Doohan in, probably 4 or 5 years younger, a younger model, Scottish homegrown quota. Totally get all that. Callum Osmond, that was a story that I think your very own Celts Are Here broke yesterday. First site to break it. It's obviously been followed up by numerous sites afterwards. What can you tell us about Callum Osmond?
It was a new name to me, certainly, but a guy who looks like he's got pretty good pedigree coming out of, Fulham under 21s, playing Premier League 2 and all that kind of stuff. My first thoughts when I seen it was like, it's surely got to be, the number 3 kind of position in the squad, most likely, where we've seen Johnny Kenny play this season, laterally towards the back end, a guy that you would hope the club can develop and move on and then can break through into the team more and more as time progresses. And yeah, I quite like it. I like moves like this being done quite quickly, I suppose. You would prefer them to be more headline transfers or guys that are, really pushing the best 11 or whatever, but it's good to see that kind of proactive nature as well, because we've spoke about on this channel a number of times, like with the transfer business, you do need to kind of marry up that guys that can play today and guys that you're cooking in the oven still a little bit somehow. And we've been kind of frustrated with some of the guys that we've brought in to do that with, because they've just been a bit, let's just say, a waste of money for the most part, So a guy that's still like coming through the youth part of his career is probably a better bet of a guy that you could bring in and develop rather than some of the guys we've tried before over the last 2 or 3 windows. So I'm quite happy for it.
One of the things I thought was quite interesting, Quinny, was the nature of the signing being for the first team squad rather than the B team. I found that quite an interesting point as well. And it's not about just getting the profile signing. I get that you need to have a player that you can bring in as well, Liam, develop. We used to call them project players. That became a bad word in the world of Celtic transfers. But this has all the hallmarks of being a project signing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's as soon as I read it, I thought, yeah, project. But then you read the reports saying, no, it's with the intention of putting him into the first team. So I don't know. 19-year-old, but he is coming from a good level. So keep an open mind, I guess. We'll see where he is. We'll know first couple of weeks into the season if he's in the squad or not. We'll know where he actually stands.
No, you're spot on. You cannot make a judgment call on a player at this stage, Liam. You're spot on there, but I'm going to throw a couple of names into the mix here for 2 different reasons, but in relation to Callum Osmond. And Quinny knows what's coming, that's why he's laughing. So he's passed a medical. This is all coming from Celtic here, by the way, so big up to the person that done the groundwork there on this story. Celtic will pay the training compensation, very much like West Ham paid the training compensation for our very own Daniel Cummings. Now, I'm looking at like everybody else, I'm looking at what's available open source. 19 years of age. He's Welsh. He's a striker. He played, like Quinny said, in the Premier League 2, where he had 10 goals and 4 assists in 17 games. His entire record, including cup competitions, was 22 played, 11 goals, 4 assists. So I'm now looking at Daniel Cummings, Ian, and I'm going to throw this one in, not a spanner in the works, just so that I can understand this, right? So he played, Daniel Cummings, 19 years of age, striker, going the other way to West Ham, a player we developed through our own system, right? And he played in the Champions League for Celtic's first team last season. He also played in the UEFA Youth League, where he scored 6 goals in 7 games. The B team, I get it, not a great standard Lowland League. People will argue that Premier League 2 is better. But all in all, 37 appearances, 29 goals for Daniel Cummings. And that includes 6 and 7 in the UEFA Youth League. I know that Quinny went to some of the games last season. I'm just trying to get my head around the process in moving on a player and bringing another one in. Is it like for like? What's the thinking behind this, Ian, when we had a goal-scoring striker in the palm of our hands? Very, very prolific. He had pushed his way into the first team. he's away to West Ham, obviously. We're bringing in Callum Osmond. Can you see where my argument is here? It seems a bit strange that type of player, that profile of player in terms of his age, his position, goal scorer, etc., has just left the building. Why not keep the one we had?
Yeah, it's a perfectly reasonable question. Is it because the guy that's coming in is sort of sprinkled with the pizzazz of the EPL? Is it because he's been scouted? And sort of pound for pound, he's better than Daniel Cummins. Obviously, Daniel Cummins is right in front of Brendan Rodgers' eyes, so you'd think he had a good level of understanding of his ability and things like that. So maybe he was happy to let him go. Maybe he didn't think he had the right sort of minerals to make it at Celtic, whereas this other guy does. We can only assume. But it does seem a strange one. I would like to have seen Cummins given more of an opportunity. But again, I suppose we have to sort of trust the process, as we like to. They quite often sort of pedal that one out, But you never know. It's. I mean, certainly in the English Premier League, younger players seem to be much more of a higher commodity these days. But I think there's a kind of a loophole where these players have been sort of being traded for sort of 30, 40, 50 million between each other. And I think it kind of gets around the FSR rules. So whether they're actually those inflated prices reflect the talent, or whether it's just a sort of a means of getting the extra money to go buy the players they want. But strange one. So time will tell. If Cummins goes down to England and starts banging the goals in, we'll certainly see what we've missed.
No, what's your take on that, Quinny? Because obviously we spoke long and hard about Daniel Cummins. There'll be people yawning in the comments section saying, get over it. He's gone for the money and all this stuff. This was a narrative, or the agents had his head turned and all that. This is the narrative that we were fed. We did a wee bit more digging. Liam wrote a very, very good blog on the subject. And there was two sides to the story, as there always is. And probably the truth will be somewhere in the middle. But I just can't get my head around it. It's a player that we had since, we actually had Daniel Cummins for 12 years. That's bizarre, eh? 19-year-old. Oh, we had him for 12 years at the football club. And you think to yourself, right, why not put all your kind of focus on a player like that rather than almost kind of swap him like for like? I mean, yeah, absolutely. You go and scout them. Maybe the boy is a better player. Maybe Brendan Rodgers has looked at both of them and thinks that Osmond is a better player and a better fit in his team. There might be something to do with a criteria in terms of maybe his pace or something like that, Quinny. I get all that. It's just that on paper, it looks as though we've got ready one, brought one in.
I think there's kind of two prongs to this. I think the first one is, number one, like Cummings is kind of going into the environment that we're bringing that guy out of. And why is that important? Where all the money we are spending now on Barrowfield and developing that youth development, so much of it is like quite scientific in the terms of like maximizing when people are growing, how fast they can get, how strong they can get, that sort of stuff. So we are obviously not happy with our youth development situation at the moment, whether that be the actual facilities they get to use and the actual practices we're putting into place to optimize all that stuff. And then you've got the lack of competitive environment or whatever. So Cummings, like for any imperfections or whatever he might have at the moment, he's came through that system, which is pretty much, we can all accept, not good enough or not like Champions League level, because that's kind of the buzzword that we're all using after the Tisdale notes that we got our hands on. Whereas this guy is coming out of that factory, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of like, well, we don't have a youth policy or a youth system to produce a player that can run as fast as this guy, is as strong as this guy, can jump as tall, whatever. So in lieu of not having the ability to produce one of them, it's a case of going and finding them. Would we have liked to keep Daniel Cummins for the homegrown stuff and the feel-good vibes of one of our own and all that, a local kid? I'm sure we would have. Having watched him in like the Youth Champions League, I thought he was quite good for the most part. I thought he was, even the season prior when we still had Vata, I thought he was better than Vata in the games I watched. He was quite hungry and had a good bit of pace and a good eye for goal. But as I say, the guys that have seen him up close and personal, it doesn't seem to be it seems like they tried to keep him, giving him that Champions League berth. They did offer him a contract or whatever, but they didn't obviously push the boat out for him. So and the balance of things, the club are probably seeing this as an upgrade on the youth striker in the team. So like I mentioned before, it's probably no Johnny Kenny next year.
Well, it does lead us on to Johnny, doesn't it? I really find it quite intriguing, Quinny, and this is why I'm throwing it out, because I don't have the answer. I'm not sure. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, why have we done this? And the answer could well be that this player is an upgrade. And if he's an upgrade, then you're asking why at 19 years of age are we not able to produce this player rather than do the switcheroo? And then obviously it's all focused on the academy again. The other guy I'm going to throw in here, because we've obviously lit a candle for Scott Bain. We're going to do another one for Joey Dawson, Liam. Joey Dawson has left the building after 4 years at Celtic. When we were talking about it before, no disrespect, Joey, I hope you score a barrel load of goals. Quinny had to scratch his head and remember who the boy was. I remember covering the game where he was thrown into the first team against St Johnstone, and I'm sure it was on Boxing Day. Right, I'm sure it was on Boxing Day, and I covered the game with Lawrence Conley. It was against St Johnstone at McDermott Park. Hugo was brought back probably too quickly from injury, pulls up. We had no other striker available because I'm sure Yakimakis was injured. Joey Dawson, with the bright ginger hair, gets his game, plays pretty well, and then disappears from view. And so I was having a wee look at this. So basically, we signed this player for 100 grand from Scunthorpe. And in that time, he has played 24 games for the B team, scoring 20 goals and getting 4 assists. Not a bad return. And he gets a game under Ange Postecoglou for the first team. He has quietly gone back to Scunthorpe on a free, Liam. So there you go, Joey Dawson. Can you remember him?
Honestly, no, I don't. The problem is that these days when you're trying to break into the Celtic team, just coming in and having a good game isn't enough. You need to come in and do something really eye-catching and outstanding. And yeah, he probably did have a good game, but the fact that I can't remember it, and a lot of other fans probably can't remember it, would suggest that he didn't do anything particularly special, which no harm to him. I'm sure he's a decent player, but you need to do something exceptional to displace anybody who's in the Celtic team at the moment.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And it's not a dig at Joey. We wish him all the best. We hope the young guy goes away down as a better player and a better rounded individual, and he does really, really well. The main subject of conversation today is going to actually be around the gaffer, Brendan Rodgers. We'll get to Brendan. But before we do that, Quinny already mentioned the future of Johnny Kenny, another guy that obviously we brought in from someone else's youth academy. Ian, he comes over from Ireland. Having scored a lot of goals over there for Sligo Rovers. There's great connections between Sligo and Celtic, none more so than the founder of the football club, but also Sean Fallon, Willie McStay. He is a legend over there. He won the treble over there. And I've had a few players played for them as well with the surname Dykes, so I'm always going to have a soft spot for Sligo Rovers. But he comes over, doesn't settle, gets sent back over to Ireland, gets back into the rhythm. Ian is scoring goals, and he's rewarded. So the circumstances actually worked in his favour. When Kyogo left, we didn't replace Kyogo with another striker, of course, moving Maida into the centre or the forward line. And Johnny Kenny starts getting games to the point where he's now had an appearance in the Scottish Cup final, albeit it was very disappointing. What does the future hold for Johnny Kenny for you, Ian? Is he a guy that we're looking at and we're thinking, right, he's done pretty well, but we're going to move him on now, something fresh, new ideas? Or do we loan him back out? Has he done enough to say, you know what, we're going to keep a hold of you, we'll be your parent club, but we'll loan you out for 6 months to 12 months?
Well, I think if we're going to persist with the 4-3-3, which I think that's pretty much set in stone, and he's not going to get that many opportunities this season, then I think, yeah, I'd like to keep him and loan him out, maybe to a fellow Scottish club, somewhere where he's going to be challenged, but he's actually going to get games under his belt consistently. And there's no point going away, and he's a bit part player somewhere else. So yeah, I'm firmly in the camp of him being retained. But if it's not to be getting a run of games in our first team, which doesn't look like it will, given the sort of formation we play, and we're looking at other strikers as well, especially this young boy coming in as well. It's a loan out for me.
Loaning the player back out, but you would say preferably in Scotland, Ian?
I think that wouldn't be a bad shout. It's worked for us in the past, hasn't it? So, I've said it before. He's playing against the same defenders as he'll be playing against when he comes back to Celtic, hopefully. And if he's right in front of the manager's sort of eyes, if it's on our own doorstep, sometimes it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. He's relying on scouting reports. Whereas if it's within Scotland, can't speak, can't lie.
Yeah, and the thing is, we already know, Quinny, that there's going to be a link-up with Celtic and Queen's Park where players are going to be moving between the two clubs. We already loaned Johnny out to Queen's Park. Didn't work out for him. He ended up spending a lot of time on the bench, and it was after that loan spell that we sent him back to Ireland. Do you agree with Ian? Do you think a Scottish loan move would be good for the kid?
I think where he goes on loan will tell you what the club think of him. I think if he does go domestic, it will be they don't probably think too much of him in the long term. I would like to see him more get a move like Mikey Johnston or Welsh has had into like Portugal or Belgium, maybe even the Austrian club if they're getting promoted or whatever. Because if he is like maybe going to be somebody you keep on the fire a little bit longer. If you think about Luke McEwen this year, imagine Luke McEwen had been a Celtic player for the last, however many years and we was just on loan all the time developing. And then when you need a backup midfielder, you don't need to sign one. They're already kind of should be off the level. So if the club fancied Johnny Kenny and they think that he's got a bit of a future, I think you could see a bit more of an interesting loan move happen for him, say Portugal or Belgium. But if they're not too fussed, they probably won't put much effort into it. And then it'll be down to the agents and whatever to try and organise something. And it's more likely to be domestic or like lower league England or whatever.
I'm glad you mentioned Mikey Johnston there because we've not hit the klaxon for a while on Mikey. But the reason I found that interesting is you're right. That move to Portugal, was it Vitória Guimarães? Actually, when you look back, that was vital, wasn't it, in Mikey Johnston's development? And then he gets the loan out to West Brom and then he gets a permanent move. And when he was in Portugal, correct me if I'm wrong, Quinn, he gets his first island cap, I think, when he's playing in Portugal and he's getting the game time out there. So absolutely, yeah, why not? And see, as a young player as well, Liam, wouldn't you just love to get that opportunity to maybe go to Belgium or Italy or just broaden your horizons and soak yourself up into a new culture and get away from the Glasgow Goldfish Bowl for half a season or a season?
Aye, I mean, it's with the greatest of respect, it's a hell of a lot better than playing in the South West of Scotland League or whatever it is the B team play in, anywhere where you can go and test yourself at a better, similar or better level than the Scottish Premier League is, you've got to jump on that. And yeah, Mikey Johnston did it, and ultimately it was the making of him. Who knows? It's unlikely, but you might find Stephen Welsh comes back and he's a vastly improved player for his time on loan. These things can happen.
Who's the last guy that went to Belgium?
Well, aye,
Jack Hendry.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Aye.
So yeah, what Jack Hendry? Absolutely.
Aye, we let him go for what, 2 or 3 million, then he goes for like double that about 9 months later. It was crazy.
They flipped it. They absolutely flipped that move. Let's get your thoughts in the comments section. It's always great to see you. We're over 1,000 live Tuesday afternoon, and I'm going to start off with Tony Ratton. And you're on the YouTube. Got to get some early signings in for a change, not just Kieran Tierney. Come on, Lowell and the football doctor, get your acts together. Even if Lowell has no part to play whatsoever in the transfers, he's always going to get name dropped going into Peter Lowell. I mean, dearie me. I don't think he's got much to do with it, Tony, but I get your point. I absolutely get your point. Joe Hamilton, afternoon troops. This summer will be very interesting. The board is under pressure to deliver because they know Brendan will walk if he doesn't get what he wants. I do want to focus on the Brendan Rodgers factor, not only in his future and what we want as fans, but also how that affects the signings this summer as well. Celtic follower on the YouTube, afternoon troops, waiting to see all these players lined up by the football doctor Tisdale. Yes, as Quinny said, we got our hands on some notes, not quite minutes, but some notes from the Tisdale presentation. A lot of it was, as you would expect, a lot of it was kind of Rodgers-centric, with the caveat that we can also implement all this if Brendan's not here, but I want him to be here. And also we have Lackwinder Pal. Hail, Paul and the boys and all the Celtic family worldwide. Club is always in my heart. A proud Scottish Sikh. Great to hear from you as well. And we've got the Urban Culture. Good day, fellow Acsom addicts. Brilliant. Absolutely love hearing from you guys. And we've also got Ian Roy. I've now met Ian. Thanks for supporting the channel. Cheers to Acsom. On my birthday, get yourself a Bovril, PJD. Absolutely love it. I'm on the flavoured water today, but Bovril, in the colder mornings and afternoons, Ian, absolutely warms the cockles, if that's the right phrase. Ian Roy, absolutely brilliant. Saw him at Barra's Art and Design. It was great to meet you. It's always great to meet people in person. And Monty is delighted that one of our panel is on today. I don't know if we want to shout that in unison, but Quinny is on, absolutely. And I don't
Then
know.
he says, I'm talking piss just to keep me in my place. Thanks, Monty.
Just to keep us all in our place, Liam, absolutely. And I'm not sure what the conversation is, but any time there is a reference to Boys from the Black Stuff, it's coming up on the screen, Jungle Lion. Absolutely. Go and watch it back. I've got it, the box set down there somewhere. And it is brilliant viewing. Absolutely brilliant viewing. Hoop Dog. Well, we're going to have to talk about Snoop. I got contacted yesterday for an interview on Celtic and Snoop Dogg's relationship and Snoop Dogg's latest venture where he wants to flip burgers at Celtic Park. I spent about 2 hours because I am a fan. I've been a fan since the early 90s, since Doggy Style, and since he kind of broke through on The Chronic by Dr. Dre. And I had that all prepared in the interview that I was on afterwards, ran over, so I was sacked, and I didn't get a chance to tell my view on the Snoop Dogg move. Anyway, usual Celtic board, trying to get us all excited over the cheap option. I'm going to digress a wee bit, Ian, and I'm going to come to you first. Snoop Dogg, we very briefly spoke about it yesterday. What's your thoughts on it? Because the way I'm looking at it is, like many other kind of celebs over the world, over the years, Snoop Dogg has basically said, I love this club for whatever reason it might be, but we don't do anything back. We don't reciprocate. We don't get him over. We don't get him on the park. We don't make him our guest for the day and give him the Champions League experience. We just don't do it. We just sit back and go, that's great. Everybody supports us. Remember, Neil Lennon got asked when he was a manager about James Bond supporting Celtic. Remember that bizarre interview? It was against Braga or something, away from home. And the overseas guy gets his opportunity to ask Neil Lennon a question. They asked about James Bond. You're thinking, dearie me, Sean Connery defected, Pat Nevin-esque many, many years before. But we've got Snoop Dogg, Ian. Are the club doing enough? I'm all about embracing this kind of thing. Get him in, make him a real fan, not just a fan from afar. And if you can hook up with him and collaborate with him, why not?
Absolutely. I think the story, it's like, it's either if it's a real story, he's obviously got the munchies, hasn't he? He's got burger vans on his mind. So that's the first point. But I've actually got there's a tenuous link with Snoop. So I'll maybe try and get in touch with the guy. He used to be a journalist for the NME, a guy called Andy Capper. Then he went to work for Vice, and he made the Snoop Lion. When he became Snoop Lion.
That's
he
right.
He made the film about Snoop Lion. So I'll have to give Andy a nudge and see if we can get straight to the man and see if he wants to come over, because I don't think Celtic. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. We kind of take this. Maybe Celtic think it's a bit of a joke and they don't take it too seriously. But I think certainly the club are guilty of not seeing sort of past their nose. But these marketing opportunities would be absolutely they're gilt edged. They're manna from heaven. All the sort of the platitudes you want to sort of chuck at them. But what a guy, an absolute bona fide legend. So we should be all over it, and not just doing the half-time draw, getting him involved and getting some kind of campaign, some kind of tie-in. You know what I mean? It's like
spot on, Ian. You're spot on, right? And I'm going to pick that up a wee bit and then throw it over to the other lads, right? Snoop Dogg is a global brand. He's a global brand, right? And he's involved in everything. Yeah, he has his own cannabis brand and all that. We get all that, right? But he's into he's got gin and juice, which he launched last year, the year before. You can go out and buy Snoop wine. I bought Martin O'Neill a bottle of red, which was 19 Crimes Snoop Doggy Dogg wine, and he enjoyed it greatly. Obviously, he's a rapper first and foremost. He's a director. He's a producer. But I keep using this example with regards to opening up new avenues to new audiences. And he now owns Death Row Records. He bought Death Row Records. He's now running it. I watched an interview just yesterday, actually, where he was talking about the Super Bowl appearance, Quinny. And when he appears at the Super Bowl, he now, as the owner of the record label, can see the sales and the downloads and the streams of Snoop Dogg's first album from 1993 going through the roof because he's appeared on the Super Bowl. And the example I always give is the big launch of Snoop Dogg and Eminem. I think it was last year or the beginning of this year on Fortnite. There are kids now who had no idea or wouldn't be allowed to listen to Snoop or Eminem who are now fans. They know the songs. They bought the skins. And it's all about, that type of skin, the Fortnite skin. They bought the skins. And it's all about opening it up to new audiences. Quinny, you and I have spoken about this before. That the influence that a brand like Snoop can have in benefit of Celtic is huge.
Yeah, totally. And it's a match made in heaven as well. Obviously, he's obviously all the stuff that goes around Snoop Dogg, everyone knows him for. But the team that wears green and white hoops, it's like it's pretty much a tap in, isn't it, marketing wise? And I've got a special edition. I don't know what the link is exactly, but I've got a special edition Jimi Hendrix Seattle Sounders kit, and it's lovely. It's like Jimi Hendrix kind of psychedelic purple and black and all that, and then the badge and everything else is kind of like a neon-y kind of yellow. And we're always after like actual cool special edition kits that mean something and all the rest of it. If you're to do one of these more cheesy ones, something like an actual tie-in with a fan that's actually a creative person or whatever would make a lot of sense and probably make Celtic a hell of a lot of money. It's always funny to see this. That I kind of echo everyone else has said, like the club don't really see beyond their nose with this stuff, and it is really a tap in because Celtic like do so well. And it's all the things that we as fans know and recognise why Celtic's a big fan base or why it's a big club, because we sell all this stuff around the world. We've got all these people that are, moved around the world for different reasons that are Celtic fans and everything else. And it's a global club. But we do all that without trying. Like the club don't really sell themselves that well. The club really don't really try and exploit easy opportunities for growth. So yeah, I think if it's similar to the Champions League chat we've had in a way, if they can be dragged into like, I will open a burger van and park it outside the front door and I'll flip burgers there, like that's how blatant he's making it, then if they need to be dragged into the future, then why not? Let's just let's help him along with it.
Yeah, kicking and screaming it would appear, because he's put it out there before that he's a Celtic fan. He even mentioned at one point he wanted to invest in the club, and then obviously he's now said, "Look, I'll even flip burgers." Now, apparently, he's appeared many times on TV with Martha Stewart. He's into his cooking, and obviously yesterday, as I've got to do doing my research, I discovered that he actually has a cookbook, and it's called From Crook to Cook. So he is into it, and I'll bring up some of the recipes actually that might be relevant to him flipping burgers later. I'm just dropping them into the Mac as we speak. So Snoop Dogg, Liam, get all over it. And another thing I like about it is even the kits. We spoke before about the tie-ins. No lover of the football club, but Ajax did a Bob Marley jersey not that long ago, remember? A homage or a tribute to Bob Marley. Bob Marley was a Celtic fan, so I don't know why Ajax did it. And obviously, you've got Gil Scott-Heron. And again, being a big hip-hop fan from back in the day, Chris and I were talking about this, and I double-checked it. It was on the Warren G album, Regulate. Do You See? He samples Gil Scott-Heron, and we all know that his old fella played with Celtic as well. And, of course, the halftime job was done by Coolio, who Snoop has collaborated with. The late, great Coolio. Liam, open goal. Will we take it, though? Will we take the opportunity?
No, of course we won't, because we never do. It's a sad reality of it. It was just funny you saying there, Snoop wrote that book From Crook to Cook, and he collaborated with Martha Stewart, who went from cook to crook. So that's interesting. I hope that happens again. The collaboration didn't include using the same financial advisors.
Well, let's hope not. Here is the book, actually, right? There he is, Snoop Dogg, and there's some of the recipes. And I was just looking, look at that. He's always been into his football. And when you look at that, he's into sport. He's into ice hockey. He's into baseball, basketball, and all this kind of stuff. So, yes, embrace him, bring him in, and show him the experience. But I imagine the fan zone with Snoop flipping burgers at a burger joint outside Celtic Park, that would just be bizarre. If you've noticed, actually, talking about merchandise and all that kind of stuff, we do have one of our new shirts behind us here. And if you're wondering why on earth we're talking about World Cups and all this kind of stuff in 1967, it's inspired by that. That was a ticket. That was one of the tickets, actually, for Racing Club versus Celtic. 3 infamous games to decide who was the greatest club side in the world back in 1967. And there was only a third game because obviously it was a draw after the first 2 games. Celtic had to play their home game at Hampden because there was such interest in that match, and we sold Hampden out. We go to Uruguay. The rest, as they say, is history. A number of players sent off. Bertie Auld sent off, refused to leave the park. I always remember watching the centenary video, guys, where it shows you the footage, and John Clark, who apparently, by all accounts, is the nicest guy in the world, and he actually gets his dukes up, and he does the old cartoon thing. He gets his dukes up as if he's ready for a fight. Somebody gets kicked up the behind. I think it was by Tommy Gennell. And Bertie Auld just refuses to go off. So he got sent off and he was like, no, ref, I'm staying on. Yes, the game that died of shame and all that kind of stuff, but a cracking design nonetheless. And you can go and check that out on our shop underneath the video. Ian, let's talk about Brendan Rodgers. We've all had our say about, obviously, Joey Dawson and Johnny Kenny and our new striker, Callum Osmond. Let's talk about Brendan, though, because the real business starts when we know what the future holds with Brendan Rodgers. Are you buying into that? Does an announcement have to be made before players start to commit their futures to Celtic?
Well, I think it's a big part of it, and I think if Brendan's going to sort of leave after the third year, what's happening with our succession planning? Are we going to do the old Celtic way? Is that we'll wait? Oh, we thought you might change your mind, Brendan, and sort of do it on the hop, or are we going to? If it was me, I'd be engaged with Brendan to sort of maybe seek his advice on who to sort of pursue to follow on from him. But all things being equal, or all things being well, should I say, hopefully Brendan wants to extend his stay. He's got the confidence that he's going to be backed, and he's going to be able to sort of take the club on and his own image really, and keep progressing as we have done since he's come back. And it would only be right if he sort of came out and just allayed everyone's fears. They might be doing it backstage with players, so it might be a non-issue. But just to sort of put his, again, we're talking about fan engagement and this whole thing with the presentation that the mad football consultant's just done. It's we're all kept in the dark. So hopefully things are going along swimmingly behind the scenes, and we'll be told accordingly. But if not, we need to have some kind of proper succession planning in place.
Yeah, this is the concern, and I know that regardless of what happens, Quinny, there are people who have made their mind up about Brendan. Some on the Acsom contributor panel who, if he leaves, they wouldn't miss him. I find that bizarre. 2 seasons in, 2 doubles, Champions League progression, looking forward to the new season. But there is one thing niggling, and that is the fact that we know this is his current contract. He's in the last year of it, and you're just looking for some kind of stability so that we can bring players in. I mean, you're signing players for 3, 4 or 5 years, and surely that plays on their mind as well. If they're being sold this vision from Brendan Rodgers that he might leave after a year.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back into what we were kind of saying a second ago in terms of Celtic not looking beyond our nose. Like, if there wasn't a manager of Brendan Rodgers' standard that was a Celtic fan and was like actually interested in working for us, we probably wouldn't have ever appointed a guy coming out the Premier League as fresh as we did the first time to also bring him back the second time. And I really hope that the club are doing everything to keep him, because realistically, like, if he does leave, Ange worked out quite nicely for us, obviously. Ronnie Dyla, maybe the jury's out still, and I think every other manager that's not called Strachan or O'Neill, you could probably just resign to or probably Lennon as well, in fact, is just it's not worked out in one way, shape or form. So I don't think there's a huge trust from Celtic fans. Like, if Rodgers was to leave, that the succession plan is there properly. I don't know if we've got that track record of really like scouting, like who's a manager that would do well with a squad and adapt to the league and everything else that goes around it. I'm quietly confident that Brendan is going to sign on and extend. I think a lot of the noises he was making towards the back end of the year were positive enough. And I don't know if it's a joke, it must be, but somebody in the chat was saying that Kennedy's lined up to take over him or whatever, right? But the reality that Celtic are like Champions League money. That's the number one thing I've got to be thinking about. So the time for like Kennedy's and that sort of stuff, it shouldn't even be coming into the conversation. So you would hope that just kind of further solidifies their resolve to get Brendan a new deal. And again, what the chat was saying earlier, is Tierney actually been announced? He's not actually been announced, and I think everyone's getting this little bit maybe there'll be a big cool announcement at some point where there'll be some funny video with Tierney coming in and saying it's happening, Dyson, or something like that, and probably marry that up with a Brendan extension and maybe some other bits and bobs or whatever. So I'm quietly confident. I think Brendan will stay on. I don't think he's in a rush to go anywhere, and I think the club know better that they've probably got it as good as they've got with a manager right now.
There's a lot there, actually, Quinny, that I agree with, because I read Liam's blog on a daily basis, obviously. And, the vibe I'm getting from yourself, Liam, is there's a real balance to be struck from all the bluster that we're getting and some of the nonsense that people are writing about what's happening at Ibrox. It's like, seriously, with regards to, there was a story the other day, and I couldn't help myself but tweet about it, and it was all about Russell Martin's initiation into knowing what Rangers are all about, and it involved Jimmy Bell in a jacuzzi with a bottle of whiskey and all that. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking we're going back to succulent lamb territory here. It's absolutely embarrassing, by the way, to commit that to print, but not just that, actually send it to an editor and then to see it published, Liam. That's ridiculous. That didn't appear on your blog, incidentally.
No, yeah, I have a blog in the works about all this, right? Because here, the funny thing is, they're quite clearly trying to get in with the new owners by sucking up to them the same way they sucked up to David Murray back in the 90s. Difference is with the Americans, it won't work. They don't care. They do not care about their public image. They care about making money. That's it. That's all that matters to them. And you can tell that's why Russell Martin is their new manager. Because they've not done it because it's popular. They've done it because he's probably cheap. He'll probably do what he's told, and that's what they want. They do not care about keeping the media happy or keeping the fans happy. And there's already signs of it amongst their fans just now, of a kind of oh no, what have we signed up for here? And I just feel like saying, boys, I tried to warn you. I tried to warn you, but you weren't listening. You've sold your soul to the American capitalists, and good luck with that. But of course, I'm critiquing capitalism whilst wearing this shirt just for the effect. But anyway, yes, sorry, not my shirt, our shirt, comrades. Anyway, where the hell am I going with this? Right, the thing with this whole media circus, and that's what it is. It's a circus. Mm-hmm. Is that it is ultimately completely futile. It's completely futile because this isn't the days of David Murray. They're not going to get anywhere by appealing to an ego, right? David Murray loved having his ego stroked by the press. He loved the fact that he could lift the phone to pretty much any journalist of any meaning in Scotland, and the next day it would be front page news. Mm-hmm. And Andrew Kavanagh doesn't care about that.
No,
he's just like, I want to make money out of this. I want my fellow shareholders to make money out of this. So if that means cutting things to the bone, which I think is the only way it's going to work, then so be it.
The whole dynamic is different. You're right. And I mean, this is an issue. It's not anything new. It's not a new phenomenon. Celtic set up, I know it became Pravda, but Celtic set up the Celtic View so that they could generate their own narrative. They were sick of seeing the narrative in the Scottish press at that time. And it was a forward-thinking, visionary launch at the time, 1965, when you think about it, and the longest-running club weekly in world football. But there was a necessity to do it back in the day, and Jock Stein, no one was better than Jock Stein at getting Celtic back on the back and front pages of the newspapers. So absolutely, it's not paranoia. When we're looking at it, it's ridiculous. But the reason I went down that wee rabbit hole there for a moment, Liam, and grabbed you with me, is there really needs to be a balance. So on the one hand, yeah, we want to hear about Brendan. We want to hear about, what happened with Paul Tisdale. We want to hear what the plans are this summer, what our expectations are for the Champions League. But at the same time, we don't want the bluster that we've been getting from the other side of the city. There needs to be a balance struck. Silence sometimes is great, but during the pre-season, I don't think it is a good thing just to remain silent, not announce Tierney, not announce a new deal for Brendan Rodgers. I just look at that and I think to myself, if you're not going to tell us what's happening, often what will happen is we'll make it up. And that's not a good thing either, Liam.
No, and that's the thing. It's every time I write a blog that is critical of Rangers or their takeover or their fans, I get an inevitable barrage of comments, and I can kind of understand it. It's like, this is a Celtic blog. Why are you talking about Rangers? Because the fact is that what is being said about them in the mainstream media is lies and exaggerations. And those lies and exaggerations are, by proxy, damaging to Celtic. So they need to be countered with truth. So that's what I set out to try and do.
Aye, you need to call it out, Liam. Absolutely. Now, on the subject of Snoop Dogg, Bob Marley, Coolio, and Gil Scott Heron, we have River Steve coming in. Had no idea Bob Marley was a Celtic fan. It's crazy how wherever we are, the opportunities we have as a club to sell out. Yeah, I've got to admit, the first time this came to my knowledge was when Dixie Deans told the story in his autobiography. Now, near the end of his football career, Dixie Deans, the goal machine that was Dixie Deans, moved over to Australia. And as you know, he went to a Bob Marley gig. He ended up meeting Bob Marley backstage. And Bob Marley knew who he was because Bob Marley was a Celtic fan. And he could recite the Lisbon Lions starting 11. And he was telling Dixie Deans that he got tapes sent over to Jamaica to watch Celtic. Now, I remember when this came out in Dixie Deans' autobiography, people still didn't believe it. Even though Dixie had a picture of him and Bob Marley in his book, people still didn't believe it. And I remember many years later, there was a brilliant documentary, and I think I must have watched it on Amazon or Netflix. And it was a Bob Marley documentary. And I'm just sitting, I've always been a Bob Marley fan. I mean, who isn't? I don't trust anybody who doesn't like Bob Marley, right? And there was this brilliant documentary, and I'm sitting watching it. And then this popped up, and every so often, I've got to share this. This popped up, right? This picture, which I screenshotted, or I took a picture out on my phone, actually. And it's Bob and Rita Marley in Jamaica with one of their kids on Bob's shoulder, wearing what looks to be the green and white hoops. And I thought to myself, there you go. There's the proof. So I fired it out. And again, as so often happens, people went on about, you've photoshopped that, or it's no green and white, and blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out that the kid on his shoulder is Rohan Marley, who was also active on Twitter at the time, former American football player. And he came on and confirmed, yes, me and my dad were massive Celtic fans back in the day. And that was it. I mean, that was the mic drop that you were looking for, Ian, because the guy on Bob Marley's shoulder confirmed, aye, that was a Celtic jersey.
Yeah. Well, it's what can you? I don't know. What can I say to that? Really, other than it's one of the most instantly recognisable stars in the world, and he knew all about Celtic. You see it with there's a lot of the actors that support Celtic, and they're sort of getting pictures with our co-stars and getting them to hold Celtic shirts up and things like that. So it's slightly tenuous, but there's loads and loads of people that support Celtic globally. And the fact that Bob Marley and such a poet, and a politically minded guy, and it goes and shows again the type of club we are, and the type of sort of musicians and artists that want to associate themselves with us. It is more than a club, and I don't mean that in the statement that the board keep hankering on to. I said it in the group chat the other day. It's the fans that make it that. When you look at, I shared that thing. I think it was the Daily Record the other day about all the famous different comments from people that have experienced Celtic Park, and it's blown their mind. It's the fans. It's the fan experience. Sorry, and it's that kind of obviously the origins of the club and how it was formed and the reasons for it. So, big up the Bob Marley massive.
Oh, definitely, Robert Nesta Marley. Now, Jungle Lion, I'm bringing this in because I think this taps into the Brendan Rodgers discussion that we're having. This Lennon Miller has all the hallmarks of John McGinn, right? Mm-hmm. Let's take Lennon Miller as an example, Quinny, right? I don't know how close. I don't know how much we want him. I don't know how close any deal is with any football club, but we know he got his first start for Scotland the other night, and he played really well, albeit against kind of lesser opposition. I get that, Liechtenstein, not the greatest. Now, Lennon Miller, let's say Celtic are interested and Brendan Rodgers is interested in Lennon Miller, and we are pursuing him as one of our targets this pre-season. If Brendan Rodgers' future isn't clear, that could scupper the deal. Lennon Miller is a guy who is a very young player, was in at Celtic, and through the academy system, was a very, very young player. For whatever reason, his dad decided to take him elsewhere. He went to Motherwell. He's broken through as a 17-year-old, 16, I think. He's now 18. He's full international cap. It does have all the hallmarks, John. Everybody that watches that player thinks that's a Celtic player right there. But if we want to bring him to the football club, everything has to be in place, because there's going to be a lot of clubs involved in this summer trying to bring him. And I'm pretty sure from abroad as well. There's going to be Italian clubs interested, Quinny. We're going to really have to fight for this. But a big part of that fight is that you are selling them a vision, and that vision is part of that vision is the manager that's going to be managing you.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of some of the success we've seen out of Forest the first time that Rodgers came in, and we've seen it with a bunch of players over both stints. That he brings that 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 Premier League standard where he knows if you want to go to that league, if you want to make it at that level, like I know precisely like how a Suarez operates, how so on and so forth kind of thing. So I think that is a very a very apt point there, that he is a big part of the picture. Champions League football, winning league titles, etc. I've got it on pretty good authority from more than one person, but like we're nowhere, we're not in this conversation whatsoever. And I think that there's like 2 or 3 clubs that across mainland Europe are kind of duking it out at this point, and I don't think we're anywhere near Lennon Miller from a little bit of intel I've got. The story that broke on Celtic here, by the way, I meant to shout this out earlier, but Mark Hendry's signed on for Celtic here for the next couple of months. So Mark Hendry's normally quite good with getting exclusives and breaking news and all the rest of it. So stay tuned to Celtic here over the summer if you're after Mark Hendry and breaking news and all the rest of it. And this isn't through him, by the way. This is just through some other connections I've got. I don't think we're even talking about Lennon Miller internally.
Other blogs are available. I'm just saying.
Other blogs are
What a great testament to Celtic media, Celtic alternative media, though, that a story like the signing of Callum Osmond is broken on Celtic media, not mainstream. And I've said this time and time again, and I think Celtic are ahead of the curve. I think we've probably always been ahead of the curve, right back to the fanzine days. And we'll keep moving, I reckon. And the great thing, and I keep saying this, is that there is a distinction. There has always been a distinction between mainstream and alternative or fan or rebel media, whatever you want to describe it as. But eventually we'll get to the point where the budgets, the gap will get shorter and shorter and shorter in terms of budgets. And all we'll be looking for as fans is it good or is it bad? Is it good quality or bad quality? Who cares if it's legacy media or alternative media, Quinny? If you're breaking a story like that, Celtic fans will read that. And all the legwork's gone into it. And the person, Mark, who broke the story, he's had a source and he's used that source and he's been able to build up a trust with that individual. He's been given the story, he's ran with it. Every other news story is second to the party. And I think when you look at that is massive kudos to the individual, to the site, Celts are here, and to the wider Celtic framework when it comes to alternative media, because it is growing. And that proves to me that whilst the mainstream media is talking about jacuzzis and bottles of whiskey, Celts are here are breaking that actual story with a bit of weight attached to it as well. Liam, we've just heard a wee bit of an update from Quinny in relation to Lennon Miller. Doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. But as
I've heard Italy. The rumours I've heard are that he's looking at going to Italy.
Is he? Can see why.
Aye. And when you look at what other young Scottish players have done since they've gone to Italy recently, you can see why that would be attractive to him. It seems that seems like a much better place to develop yourself as a young Scottish player than Scotland at the moment, even if you do get a move to Celtic or Rangers.
I know he's not in and around the Scotland squad, and he's not really spoken about when people are talking about the Italian success. But Ewan Henderson was certainly a trailblazer. I know you and Liam. Liam Henderson was something of a trailblazer, wasn't he? He went over there. Yeah. And then I remember when he went over, it was a bit of an unusual move for a Scottish youngster. Goes over there and obviously still there all these years later, plying his trade in Italy. And as I say, I mean, can you imagine being a young guy? Aaron Hickey went over, came back, of course. And out there we've got Billy Gilmore, Scott McTominay and Lewis Ferguson. I've seen something really interesting the other night. As you know, my interest in Scotland in terms of an international team stops with the involvement of Celtic players, and it was great to see Tony Ralston getting another cap. Billy Gilmore, 23-year-old, 40 caps. That's sensational to get to that number, isn't it? I mean, I was looking at it. We all know we've only had one player winning 100 or more caps, and that's Kenny Dalglish. And I was looking at some of the other guys in the squad, Andy Robertson, John McGinn. They guys weren't hitting that kind of level, 40 caps until they were 26 or 27. So we are genuinely looking at 3 players in one squad who are all vying for 100 caps, some way down the road for Billy Gilmore. But that's incredible, Quinny, isn't it? All in one squad in the modern day.
Yeah. That's good development. I remember that was something Steve Clark spoke about quite early on as Scotland manager, is wanting to get the cap count up for a lot of the team because we just didn't have that top end international experience, mainly because we didn't qualify for tournaments or whatever. But I think at least been a breath of fresh air for Scottish players. It's a nice kind of step up from where our league is, of course, and it's not quite got the same pace and intensity to it as the other kind of main European leagues. It's still a bit more thoughtful. It's still a bit more considered in terms of, you know, like how it works tactically and whatever. So yeah, I think I think Italy's been great to Scottish players. And again, talking about some of the players we've had in the discussion today, like you can really see it with the likes of Hickeys and Lewis Ferguson's, especially the ones that you've seen play SPFL football, that you're able to just unlock more of a player's potential in these different environments against different oppositions. It's not always a better and a stronger versus a weaker and a worse situation, but it's sometimes just a different, and it's that kind of personal challenge that kind of rides through all of it as well. So yeah, it's good to see there's been some success from it so far, and hopefully that success just in turn means there's more people that we can sell our players to, because that's ultimately part of the problem we have sometimes is, there's not that many buyers for them, and that's why the price is low. But more buyers means price goes up. So yeah, it's good to see people who are getting a turnout of Scottish talent, if it's not us.
No, you're right, because as you say, it can benefit you in the long run as well. Paddy Lavery, I'm bringing this up. He's having a dig at Chris for his Chuck Norris beard. But not only is he Chuck Norris-esque with a beard, he's also Chuck Norris-esque with a double denim. And I know he won't mind me having a wee dig because we all get it. Davo, Celtic need to spend in accordance with Champions League ambitions this summer. What are the ambitions? This is the thing. We don't know. We don't know what the ambitions are. I mean, listen, see if our ambitions are to at least match last season, then that's an ambition. And I'm thinking to myself, like we've spoken about before, Quinny, do that 4 out of 5 seasons. You then are regarded as a Champions League team. Nobody expects you to win the competition, but you are there and thereabouts every season on season. You're racking up the millions that it brings, and hopefully the reinvestment that would result in. And then you can progress from there. River C, you're back in on the YouTube. Hail, folks. Apparently, we're in the process of doing a reverse England, stealing from them. Fulham supporters are not happy. Wonder why Kenny wasn't deemed good enough, though. Well, this is the thing. We don't know what the scouting reports for our new signing are going to be, but maybe he is better. Maybe he is an upgrade. Quinny mentioned that earlier. M. Young, wouldn't mind Kenny going on loan to Aberdeen, Hibs or Dundee United. So gets both SPL and European games. And I always say they can damage your challengers if they're at an Aberdeen, a Hibs or a Dundee United. You know, we've seen Scalesy and Scott Brown being part of brilliant results against Rangers when they were at Aberdeen. You put them out there if you're a young player in the SPFL, you might be able to damage our main challengers. We're talking upgrades. And Tino, friend of Acsom and host of the Celtic Exchange, has done a series of interviews with David Lowe. We have spoken to David Lowe on a regular basis on Acsom. I think he's maybe appeared 4 times over the piece. Always worth listening to Ian. I know you know him on a personal level as well. I've been to the Celtic game. I've gone to Celtic games with David Lowe. Always great chat. But he's always looking ahead. He's always looking forward as to how we can develop. And one of the big chats that we've had on Acsom for ages now, I think it started probably around about the time of the Wander Round Paradise, was upgrading the main stand, upgrading the footprint of Celtic Park. I have gone down in the last couple of years to Spurs and Liverpool to pick up Acsom awards for all my cohorts here. And you look around the stadiums, I know Spurs probably cost about 800 million quid, but you look about the stadiums and you look at what they are doing outside the stadium, Ian. Anfield, I always use Anfield. Yeah. Every brick, every tile is celebrating the history of Liverpool Football Club. You walk around Celtic Park, it's the concrete graveyard. You know, yeah, there's the Celtic Way, looks great. And you've got some things around about the stadium, but a lot of it's, breeze blocks and things like that. And we've spoken time and time again on Acsom about celebrate what we've got, all the heroes, all the amazing triumphant successes that we've had over the years. Get it up. Statues, murals, all this kind of thing can happen, as well as fan zones. Snoop Dogg flipping burgers outside and all that. But what David's talking about is upgrading the main stand. There was an announcement that the executive boxes are going to get a lucky paint. They're going to obviously get an upgrade. And in turn, those who buy the boxes are going to be paying 10% extra for the fact that there's going to be an upgrade. But that shows, and this is what David was talking about with the Celtic Exchange, Ian, you improve and you make more money. You improve the facilities, you can make more money that way. It is definitely time, isn't it? And we've never had this rubber stamp that it is or isn't going to happen with regards to the main stand. Aston Villa are rebuilding their main stand, £100 million. Not one season ticket holder will miss a game of football whilst that's built. They've found a way. There are ways to do it, Ian. Why don't we do it?
Well, we said this recently, but in terms of the the team, the first team or the manager, it needs to be refreshed every now and again. I think the thing that holds us back, is there any good reason why we're not doing it? We haven't done it already, which, considering the sort of the cash that we've got lying about, we could do a share issue. It could be done, and if it was me on that board, I'd want to leave a legacy. I'd want to do it on my watch for future generations. And I know they're fans. Look, I'm not trying to. They've done wonderful things for us, but I think at that level, it needs a refresh. It needs some fresh ideas. It needs some more progression. Maybe go and try and cherry pick some people from the wonderful, the WWF league. I know Rangers have done it recently. They've gone and got people from Everton and stuff like that. But it needs that kind of fresh approach. It needs us, and we need to start looking at future proof. Because as David Lowe said in one of Tino's interviews, it wasn't the last one; it was the one before, I think. When he's on about the stadium, it's 25 years old, and the sort of the reach of Celtic is diminishing in the States and all that kind of stuff. So we need to just, again, I use the term future proof, but we need to look at doing it. And I think the fact that the exec boxes have been refurbished and done up just shows that you're not going to go refurb them and then rip the stand down, not for another few years at least anyway. So that kind of hints at what the next maybe 5 years is going to look like, and it's not upgrading the main stand.
That's a good point, that, Ian. Even though in terms of a rebuild, it's a drop in the ocean. You're right. Why would they invest any kind of money in unless it was absolutely necessary? David Lowe speaks about the dado rails and the corporate boxes and all this kind of stuff. A throwback to the 80s or the 90s. But you're right. The redevelopment under Fergus McCann. We went back to Celtic Park after a year at Hampden in 1995. The brand new bits of Celtic Park are now 30-year-old. The fascia, it was 1987 that we redid the fascia, wasn't it, on the main stand for the centenary year. The main stand was rebuilt in 1971. Some of the structure of the main stand was in the 1920s, now 100 years old. So absolutely. And the thing with that as well, Quinny, there's other things that could happen if you redevelop the main stand in terms of it getting the top grading when it comes to hosting Champions League finals. For example, we can't do that because of the main stand. We can't do it because of the dressing rooms in the main stand. We can't do it because there's no bus park underneath for security, the main stand. When you go to Hampden and the buses go underneath and then they get a lift up to the dressing rooms and all this kind of stuff. Concerts. Well, this came out in the small period of time that Don Mackay was at the football club. He wanted to have concerts at Celtic Park. First concert I ever went to, U2, 1993. We can no longer do it because to erect the stage for these big music events, we don't have the space to actually get the toes in to the stadium. They're too low down. So there's lots and lots of things that we could benefit from if we developed it, Quinny. And also the fan experience. Let's talk about fan experience as well. The fact that you could turn up at Celtic Park a couple of hours before the game and there's loads to do. People do turn up early doors, but there isn't a great deal to do, is there?
No, not unless you've got a ticket into the fancy bit to go and get wellied before the game or whatever. But I think you've seen with how much Tottenham managed to raise for their stadium redevelopment, just how much money is in making the stadium more of a venue. Now, I don't think we're going to go all the way down the NFL route or anything like that, but I think that's one of the main things that the club and the board would need to kind of at least have some sort of soft things in place for. Like, if we do push the boat out with all this stuff, like, could we start having events in the off season? Could we start then doing, and I'm not saying NFL, but other stuff, concerts like you've mentioned, Champions League finals would be like once every 10 years or something. So it's not really going to fill the pockets, too often. But yeah, I don't know. I think when I heard David Lowe, it might have been on Acsom, it might have been Celtic Exchange, but I don't know. It sounded like to me like it was just going to be far too expensive, that the club would probably just slide it and just be like, oh, well, it's not something we are, conservative with a small c, as Tino likes to say. They don't want to spend 120 million to do it, or however much it would cost, or mortgage that up, or whatever, because the net gain in some sort of short to medium term probably wouldn't weigh it out. So I don't know. I think it does hold us back, but I think it's maybe just a wee bit of. Actually, I don't really know enough about it in terms of the business that would go in behind the scenes and stuff, but the fan experience element, we're definitely way behind, and that's just the surrounding, like you mentioned, the footprint of the stadium that needs a lot taken care of. Because again, like we've mentioned a few times in the show today, Celtic are leaving a lot of money on the table when it comes to the business side of things. Like I never really thought about it too much until you mentioned it on one time. I've heard you mention it a few times, but like if people are going to Celtic Park, you want them to go there and spend their tourist dollars there. If I'm going out for a match day, I'm in the Merchant City, drinking before or after, and then so it's just, again, if I'm at Tottenham, if I'm at Anfield, if I'm at Villa Park, I've been to all these stadiums in the last couple of years. Like, you can spend all your money in the stadium, and then on your merry way from there you go, sort of thing. So it's it's definitely something that you would hope is in the drawing board, but I say I'm not that well covered in how you would make it happen and structurally what can happen and all that kind of stuff.
You're right, though, Quinny. I mean, we talk about the economical hit of Celtic's home attendances over a period of a year, and there was a report James McKenzie spoke about. I think Celtic were worth £254 million to the Scottish economy, and as a business, Liam, the club need to be looking at that, going, that's our fans' money, and it's going elsewhere. That's outside the Celtic Park. That money going to bars and clubs and restaurants, shops, flights, hotels, etc., and the club needs to look at that and say, well, we are extremely well off, but we could tap into this even more, because it's money that is being spent by people going to watch Celtic.
I actually wrote a blog about this earlier today. The short-termism that's holding Celtic back, and the main stand. It was badly needed of an upgrade last time I sat in it, which was more than 20 years ago. And, the access is too narrow. The kiosks are always queued out the door because they're too small. The facilities, you can't get hot water in the toilets. These are long-term problems that just haven't been dealt with. And yet, from what I understand, they are upgrading the corporate boxes in the main stand, and they're going to be upgrading the dugouts, hopefully to a point where people that are sat behind them can actually see what's going on. Because I was talking to an Acsom viewer today on Facebook who was saying that he took his boy to the game a while ago, and the seats were right behind the dugout and they couldn't see a damn thing. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that's getting sorted. But no, it's just they won't speculate to accumulate. They are too conservative in that respect, as Quinny said earlier. They're too conservative. If we spend, 100 million now or whatever it costs to get that stand completely rebuilt up to UEFA 5-star standard, including all the media facilities, underground car park, everything that's needed, just say it was 100 million. We'd make that back within probably 10 or 15 years. Easily. Probably less than that.
No,
but
you're right.
The club won't do that.
I think you're spot on with that in respect to how you would make your money back. But it's already been mentioned by David, it's not like you're spending that money out your bank. You're finding other ways to finance it as well, Liam. So absolutely, as you're paying it back, you're making it back. So
David Murray could basically, he had the bank, the Royal Bank of Scotland, on speed dial for like 30 years. So I'm sure Celtic could negotiate an 8-figure loan from somebody if we needed it, Yeah,
you're right. Remember, we always went on about that, the co-op loan. That was paid off. That's gone. We've paid that off, So in relation to it, absolutely, it's something that's going to remain. I think that when I look at it, if I'm being completely honest about it, I think the only reason or the only time Celtic will do it is if we move out of Scottish football, for whatever reason that could be. If there is a European League, obviously the Champions League's looking more and more like a European League season on season. If Celtic are part of that on a regular basis, maybe that will push us into making that decision. Listen, it's very, very interesting to talk about these types of subjects. We have spoken about everything from Joey Dawson to Snoop Dogg flipping burgers on Acsom today.
I'm not going to let you away yet because you told me at the very beginning there was something to do with Abelgard. And you've not done it yet.
I did, didn't I? Right.
Oh.
Here it is. I always have a look to see whose birthday it is in the world of Celtic.
Oh.
And a big shout out to the late, great Joe McBride, who was an absolute goal-scoring machine for Celtic and every other club that he played for, actually. And interestingly enough, he played for Dunfermline. He is still Dunfermline and will probably remain forever Dunfermline's highest European goal scorer. McLaughlin P brings in the point that maybe Kenny could go to Dunfermline under Neil Lennon. Good shout. No, the reason I brought up Abelgard is I didn't realise, Quinny, he plays for Como. Alex Baye, we're playing him in a friendly this summer. We might still see Abelgard again. We were talking about strange, obscure signings. He must have been one of the most obscure, Quinny, under Ange Postecoglou. He's 29 today. Happy birthday, Abelgard. But we might play against him for Como in the pre-season.
Yeah, I didn't realise that's where he played as well. He's been on loan last year. But yeah, that'd be funny.
But it was a strange signing, though. A very strange
We've
signing.
also just announced another pre-season friendly. Sorry, guys. We're away to Queen's Park on July 4th, apparently.
Has that been announced as well? Yeah, probably a tie-in to the player.
A wee annual friendly.
We annual friendly, absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to all of that. We'll cover every single game. Listen, thanks every single one of you for getting involved in a Celtic State of Mind this Tuesday afternoon. It's been great fun. I'm away to Glasgow to film this week's This Is Acsom. Check us out on Friday night. And if you want one of these T-shirts, amongst other merchandise, the Acsom shop is underneath this video. Thanks every single one of you, Ian, Liam and Quinny, for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.